In a shocking and heartbreaking crime, an MLB player and his former nanny have been accused of being involved in the murder of an elderly couple, Robert and Wendy Spoor. The couple lived in a peaceful home in Lake Tahoe, California. On June 5, 2021, a masked gunman broke into their home and opened fire. Robert was tragically killed in the attack, while Wendy was severely injured, suffering 2 gunshot wounds to the head. Despite her injuries, Wendy was able to call 911 for help. She was quickly taken to a trauma center in Reno, Nevada. Wendy's recovery was long and painful, as she had to relearn how to walk, talk, and eat. Sadly, after battling for her life for nearly a year, Wendy passed away, and her death was linked to the trauma from the attack. Her family, especially their daughter Adrienne, was devastated by the loss of both parents. For Adrienne, the pain of losing both her parents was made worse by not knowing who was responsible for this brutal crime. The Placer County Sheriff's Office began investigating the shooting, initially thinking it might have been committed by a stranger. However, when they examined the crime scene, they found no signs of theft or a struggle, which suggested that the attack had been planned. Nothing in the house seemed out of place, and nothing was taken, which made investigators believe the crime was targeted, not random. Authorities released surveillance footage showing the suspect, a masked gunman, moving up the driveway just before the shooting. The footage showed the gunman waiting for the couple to return home, but despite the video evidence, the investigation hit a dead end. The sheriff's office was unable to identify the suspect, and the case went cold. To try to get answers, the Spoor family offered a $150,000 reward for any information that could lead to the arrest and conviction of the person responsible. Sadly, despite the reward and efforts to gather tips, no new leads came forward, and the case remained unsolved for a long time. In 2023, 2 people were arrested in connection with the murder of Robert and Wendy Spoor. The suspects were Daniel Serafai, the couple's son-in-law, and Samantha Scott, a former nanny who worked for the family. They were arrested in separate cities in Nevada and were later brought back to California to face charges. Daniel Serafai had once been a professional baseball player. He played for several MLB teams, including the Minnesota Twins, Pittsburgh Pirates, and San Diego Padres. However, his career ended in 2007 after he was caught using performance-enhancing drugs, PEDs. After that, he continued playing baseball in Mexico. Serafai was married to Erin Spoor, the daughter of the victims, Robert and Wendy. Samantha Scott, the former nanny, was also close to the Spoor family, especially to Erin. The connection between the suspects and the victims raised many questions, as both were trusted members of the family. The shocking arrests suggested that the people closest to the Spoor family might have been involved in the tragic crime. Daniel Serafai was married to Erin Spoor, the daughter of Robert and Wendy Spoor, the victims of the shooting. Erin and Daniel had a life together, and Daniel was part of the Spoor family through his marriage. Their relationship seemed normal, and no one expected Daniel to be involved in something so horrible. Samantha Scott, the former nanny, was also very close to the Spoor family. She had worked for them and was a trusted friend of Erin. The family believed Samantha was a loyal friend and someone they could count on. Erin and Samantha had a strong bond, and the family had no reason to suspect them of being involved in any crime. However, as the investigation continued, it was discovered that the suspects, Daniel Serafai and Samantha Scott, were much closer to the victims than anyone had realized. This connection made the case even more shocking, as the people who were supposed to be trusted members of the family were now accused of being involved in the murder of Robert and Wendy Spoor. The truth about their involvement left the family in disbelief and heartbreak. Daniel Serafai is facing serious charges for his involvement in the murder of Robert and Wendy Spoor. The charges include first-degree burglary, murder, and child endangerment. The burglary charge relates to Daniel allegedly breaking into the Spoor family home without permission. Investigators believe he entered the house to carry out the attack. What makes the situation even worse is that children were present in the home at the time, which led to the additional charge of child endangerment. The children were there when the shooting took place, making the crime even more disturbing. The motive behind the murder is still unclear, but many believe it could have been financially driven. It is suspected that Daniel and his wife, Erin, may have been facing financial difficulties and saw an opportunity to gain from the victim's estate. The Spoor family had been generous to Daniel and Erin in the past, but it appears they were looking for more. This possible financial motive raises many questions about why they would go so far as to kill the victims for money. The investigation is still ongoing, and many details are still emerging about what led to the tragic deaths of Robert and Wendy Spoor. Samantha Scott, the former nanny of the Spoor family, pleaded guilty to being an accessory after the fact. This means she admitted to helping Daniel Serafai after the murder, but not directly participating in the crime itself. The charge against her is that she assisted in covering up the crime by helping Daniel escape and hide the evidence. Scott faces a possible sentence of up to 3 years in prison for her role in the crime. However, the judge will decide her sentence later, based on her involvement and how much help she provided to the authorities during the investigation. It is important to note that there is no evidence showing that Scott was directly involved in the shooting itself. Investigators believe she was not part of the planning or execution of the murder, but rather helped Daniel after the fact. This makes her role in the crime less serious than Daniel's, who is facing much more severe charges. Still, Scott's guilty plea means she will have to face the consequences of her actions, even though she did not take part in the actual killing. Adrienne Spoor, the sister of Erin Spoor, has filed a civil lawsuit against Erin, her husband Daniel Serafai, and Samantha Scott. The lawsuit claims that Erin and Serafai planned the murder of Erin's parents, Robert and Wendy Spoor, for financial gain. The family believes that Erin and Serafai were struggling financially and saw the victim's estate as a way to solve their money problems. The lawsuit suggests that Erin and Daniel were dependent on her parents for financial support. They were also facing challenges with their business ventures, and their financial troubles may have led them to plan the murder of her parents. According to the lawsuit, the couple wanted to inherit their parents' money and assets. Samantha Scott is also accused in the lawsuit of helping cover up the crime. It claims that she assisted Daniel and Erin in fleeing after the murder and tried to hide the evidence. The civil case is focused on the idea that the murder was motivated by greed, and that the conspirators worked together to kill Robert and Wendy for financial gain. The lawsuit is still ongoing, and these serious allegations are being investigated further. The emotional fallout from the murder has been devastating for the Spoor family. After the shooting, Wendy, the surviving victim, became suspicious of her daughter Erin's involvement in the crime. Wendy even went as far as to disinherit Erin, believing she had a key role in planning the murder of her parents. This caused a lot of pain for the family, especially for Adrienne, Wendy's other daughter. The loss of her parents was already heartbreaking, but the added tension and distrust within the family made it even harder. Adrienne now has to deal with the emotional distress of losing both parents and the shocking betrayal by her sister. Wendy's strong belief that Erin was involved in the crime left the family deeply divided. Adrienne continues to fight for justice, despite the complex and painful situation with her own sister. The criminal trial against Daniel Serafai is ongoing, and he faces serious charges for the murder of Robert and Wendy Spoor. His trial will determine whether he is guilty or not, and if convicted, he could face a long prison sentence. Samantha Scott, who pleaded guilty to helping cover up the crime, is awaiting sentencing. She could receive up to 3 years in prison, but her sentence will depend on how much she cooperates with the authorities. There are also important differences between the criminal case and the civil lawsuit. The criminal case is focused on whether Serafai and Scott committed the murder and what penalties they should face. In the civil lawsuit, Adrienne Spoor is suing Erin, Serafai, and Scott for wrongful death and emotional distress. The civil case is about seeking financial compensation for the loss of her parents and the pain caused by the crime. The outcome of the criminal trial could impact the civil case. If Seraphi is found guilty, it could strengthen Adrian's lawsuit. However, if he is acquitted, the civil case could still continue, as it has a lower standard of proof. The legal process will unfold in the coming months, and the family is hoping for justice. This case highlights the deep impact of family betrayal and greed. The tragic murder of Robert and Wendy Spoor shows how far people can go for financial gain, even if it means hurting their own loved ones. Aaron Spoor's possible involvement in the crime raises serious questions about how greed can tear apart a family. While the investigation and legal proceedings continue, the question of Aaron's role in her parents' deaths remains unresolved, leaving the family with painful doubts and uncertainty. The Spoor family has already suffered the loss of two beloved parents, and the emotional damage from this betrayal has been overwhelming. For Adrian, losing her parents and dealing with the suspicion surrounding her sister's involvement has been incredibly difficult. As the criminal trial and civil lawsuit unfold, the family is hoping for answers and justice. The outcome of this case will hopefully bring some closure and accountability for the victims. The Spoor family deserves to know the truth about what happened, and the hope is that the legal process will hold those responsible accountable. Ultimately, this case serves as a reminder of the destructive power of greed and betrayal within families, and the importance of seeking justice for those who have been wronged.